Hello, my friends. It's Noah with Learn Meta Analysis, and I want to rant for a little bit today. Okay, so I get asked to review a lot of meta analyses, and I see a lot of mistakes over and over and over and over again. And I want to talk about those four mistakes today because you should not be making them. So, the main thing that I want to point out first is it is 2025 now. Okay, so like some of these mistakes were understandable when there weren't a billion resources on how to do meta-analysis and how to learn about meta-analysis, or before Prisma existed. Like, we really just need to slow down, take our time, plan our studies really well, make sure we understand what's going on. And with that preface, let me tell you about the four things that I'm going to rant about for a little bit. The first one is fixed versus random effects. Second is no transparency with R. Third is not following Prisma. And fourth, and probably the thing that annoys me the most when I see it, is not actually knowing what you analyzed and then grossly overgeneralizing the results. Okay, so let's start about fixed versus random effects first. First of all, there are tons of papers about how to tell these things apart and when you should use which. There are very specific situations you should use fixed effects and very specific situations when you should use random effects. In my field of educational psychology, we almost always use random effects. I am not going to use this space as a time to go through and explain all of the ins and outs of what these two things are for and all the differences and why it matters, blah, blah, blah. All I'm going to say is in the description, I'm going to link a paper about fixed versus random effects. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you if you struggle with this. The second thing that I'm going to mention is that I personally don't see a reason for reporting both fixed and random effects in the same paper. I've seen this done before. I do not understand it because they have completely different assumptions. So if they have different assumptions, why are you reporting both? It doesn't make any sense. You should go with the one that makes sense given the study that you're conducting. I don't understand why sometimes we see both fixed and random effects reported. If you have a good evidence-based reason for reporting both, please tell me in the comments so I can learn something, because this is something that drives me crazy. And when I read it, from my perspective, I'm like, does your study fall in line and your sample fall in line with a fixed effects model or a random effects model? There is no both in my mental framework. So if you have concrete examples of why we should use both, please feel free to drop them in the comments, but I haven't seen any yet in my field. So that's the first thing. The second piece is no transparency with your R code. And what I mean about this is if you say you conducted your meta-analysis with Metaphor or even JASP, both of those things have R code associated, especially if you're actually doing this in R. You have that R code. And if you are not sharing that R code with reviewers, I am automatically questioning, did you do something wrong? And a lot of times when I go through and I review that R code, I find small mistakes that matter. Okay, so like this is not a rare thing, and I don't even think it's something that we need to be too upset about. Like as a reviewer, if I find a small mistake, all I ask is for a revision that addresses that mistake. Because let's be honest, in R, it's very simple to make a small typo. It's very simple. And hopefully you catch it or your colleague catches it. But let's be real, we're all humans and we all make mistakes. So one of the benefits to you as an author of submitting your R code with your paper is hopefully at least one of those reviewers is going to look at that R code and make sure that it's doing what you think it's doing. So if you run your analyses in R, please submit your R code as supplementary material so that way the people who read it can actually see, do they believe the analyses that you ran? There's no reason to hide this, okay? I think a lot of people are really hesitant to share their R code because they're afraid that they made a mistake and then somebody's going to call them out on that mistake. And I want to flip that whole paradigm back on that. Isn't it worse to make a mistake and not tell the community you made a mistake and your paper isn't reliable? To me, that is way worse than having a reviewer say, hey, you made a small mistake, can you fix it? Like, I don't understand this concept of trying to hide your R code at all. I don't understand it. To me, it's incomprehensible. The major benefit of things like R or JASP, which will give you the R code for the analyses, the major benefits of that is that other people can help ensure that you did the right thing and they can understand completely what you did. There's no games, there's no questioning. So be transparent with your R code. Submit it as a supplementary material so that reviewers can see it if they want to. Third is not following Prisma. I'm not going to go on and on and on about this, but all I will say is Prisma is the standard in many, many fields. The most recent one, as of the time I'm recording this, to my knowledge, is the Prisma 2020 standards. They have a checklist and they have a flowchart. Submitting the flowchart alone is not following the Prisma reporting standards. It's part of the Prisma reporting standards. If you look, they have a checklist with a whole bunch of items on it, and you can go through and you can mark off as you go through your paper and make sure that you have all of the elements of Prisma in there. Now, some of the big things that I'm looking for as a reviewer is, number one, do you have the elements of Prisma? Number two, is your study transparent? Can I tell everything that you did and understand everything that you did? And number three, is it replicable? Did you give me enough detail where I can actually replicate every single step that you did and reasonably expect to get at the same conclusion? Okay, so we really need to make sure that we are following Prisma and reporting our studies very clearly. The other thing is the Prisma standards are reporting standards. So this is just a small wording thing, but sometimes I see people say, we conducted a Prisma systematic review. And from my perspective, that's not the way we should be talking about it, unless there's something about Prisma that I don't know. But the times that I've read about Prisma, Prisma are reporting standards. It's right there in the name. Preferred reporting items for systematic review and meta-analysis. I think that's what Prisma stands for, if I remember right. I should have looked it up before this video, but that's okay. But the main thing is preferred reporting. So it's talking about reporting, right? So like it's outlining all of the details you should be reporting in your study. So we need to make sure that we are actually reporting those things, and we should identify that we are reporting our study in alignment with the Prisma standards. All right, so last but not least, this is going to seem obvious, but it's a problem, which is not understanding what you actually analyzed. So let that sink in. Not understanding what you actually analyzed. So what I see a lot with meta-analyses is gross overgeneralizations. Okay, so what I mean by that, let's say we do a study where we are comparing the impact of a virtual character to no virtual character on learning. Now, one conclusion could be that, I mean, obviously, we have the obvious conclusion of one is better than the other, right? If that's what the effect sizes show. But let's think about theory. Can we say why people learned more in this scenario? Just only given the information I gave you. So given the information that we tested a virtual character versus no virtual character. This is my own field, so I'm speaking about my own papers right now, okay? Like, don't read anything into this at all other than that's the only field that I know, so it's easy for me to come up with examples off the top of my head because, as you guys know from watching the channel, I don't script these things out ahead of time other than drawing up some quick slides if you're lucky. Like, so let's think about this for a minute. If we have virtual character and we're comparing it to no virtual character, we know one group did better because we have an effect size for that. But can we say why that group did better? The answer is no. Okay, like given the information I just gave you, the answer is no. And the reason is that we did not test that. That is not what the meta-analysis was for. The meta-analysis was testing the effect of presence versus absence. So that doesn't necessarily tell us why that thing is more effective. Now, the caveat to this is you may have moderators that help explain why that is more effective. But like in my field, conclusion that one could be likely to draw, and perhaps I said this back in one of my early papers, I honestly don't know, I didn't go back to look before I started ranting about this today, is you could, like, our field is built on a lot of assumptions, like putting a virtual character in helps support the social aspects of learning, and that social aspect is what's actually going to be facilitating the learning process. But here's the thing. We didn't actually test if it was the social aspect increasing learning. We made an assumption it was the social aspect because the character performed better than the no character. So this is what I mean when you need to really think about understanding what exactly you analyzed and what exactly you tested so that you don't have these big overgeneralizations and overgeneralizing the claims of your study. Okay, so this is a big thing. It's not only related to meta-analyses. It's just I see it a lot in meta-analyses. And I think the reason is because in my field, we always want to, I shouldn't say always, we often have implications for theory and implications for practice as kind of required sections. And they're not formally required in many cases, but in most papers they're there. So when a reviewer comes back and says, what does this mean for theory? The natural thing to do is want to try and draw conclusions about what it means for theory. But you don't want to overgeneralize those conclusions. And I think it's a very common thing to accidentally do. And so that's all I wanted to say here today is be aware of what you're actually testing and the conclusions you can draw from it. And make sure that you're not drawing conclusions based on your assumptions. Or if you are going to draw some conclusions based on your assumptions, make it very, very clear in your paper what is being assumed as you are making these claims, right? So like in the virtual characters, I try and make it very explicit, like my recent papers that say like, we tested presence versus absence. Theoretically speaking, this could be due to the social processes that are being activated, but we have no actual empirical evidence for that. We need future research to be able to do this. And that right there, my friends, is your implications for theory. Your implications for theory are highlighting productive areas for future research. Okay, so I know that's a common stick point in a lot of meta-analyses because people want to be able to make claims about theory, but it's hard to do when you're comparing one thing to another that doesn't necessarily have a clear theoretical reason why. It might have assumptions, but it might not have the evidence. You might not actually be testing the evidence. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying not understanding what you analyze. It's really a matter of overgeneralization, and we need to be careful not to overgeneralize our results. So that said, these are the 4 things that are kind of bugging me lately. I've read a good number of meta-analyses over the last year, and but these are some of the 4 major things that I look for as a reviewer. And so I wanted to pass them on to you so that hopefully you can anticipate what reviewers might say about your paper and help you avoid some of these common problems. So that said, if this has been a helpful video for you, please feel free to like and subscribe to help support the channel. If you guys have any questions about any of these things, drop them into the chat. As I mentioned before, if you have examples of when using fixed and random effects in the same paper is of value, I would love to hear more about that because, like I said, in my mental framework, they don't exist in the same space. They're completely different assumptions about the data that you're working with, and each one has its place, and I don't really see much overlap between the two. So if your field has areas where those overlap, I would love to hear more about it so I can learn. So that said, thank you guys, have a great day, and I will see you all in the next video.